Chloe Dawson adjusted her bag on her shoulder as she stood before the massive facade of Bayside Medical Institute. The early morning sun cast sharp shadows over the sprawling building, and the cold breeze made her tuck a stray strand of her brown hair behind her ear. At just 25, Chloe was still finding her footing in the demanding field of nursing. Temporary assignments like this one gave her valuable experience, but the sheer scale and pace of Bayside always left her nerves frayed. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself why she was here. "You're good at what you do. They need you," she whispered, her hazel eyes meeting her reflection in the glass doors. As she stepped inside, the familiar chaos of the hospital washed over her. Nurses and doctors rushing past, the squeak of shoes on polished floors, and the ever-present tang of disinfectant hanging in the air. Chloe navigated the labyrinth of corridors with a practiced grace, though the buzz of activity still felt overwhelming. Her first stop was the locker room. Once there, she slipped into her red uniform, meticulously smoothing out any creases. After tying her hair into a neat bun, she squared her shoulders, grabbed her clipboard, and made her way to the nurse's station to check her assignment for the day. The head nurse handed her a file with a quick briefing. Room 312, Lila Franklin, 86 years old, recovering from a heart attack. Stable, but she'll need regular assistance and monitoring. Chloe nodded, flipping through the file as she headed to the room. The notes showed steady progress, but something about the detailed observations, the loneliness, her tendency to withdraw, struck a chord with Chloe. When she knocked gently on the door and stepped into the room, her heart softened at the sight before her. Lila Franklin was a frail, elderly woman, her thin frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. Her hands trembled as she struggled to sit up, her dark eyes filled with equal parts exhaustion and gratitude. "Good morning, Mrs. Franklin," Chloe said, moving closer with a warm smile. "I'm Chloe, your nurse for the weekend. How are you feeling today?" Lila offered a faint smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bless you, dear. I'm all right, just tired of lying here." Chloe began her routine assessment, checking Lila's vitals and making careful notes. As she worked, she noticed the elderly woman's curiosity and warmth. Lila asked questions about Chloe's life, eager for any semblance of connection. "You're very gentle, my dear," Lila said softly as Chloe helped her with her morning medication. "The others rush in and out, but you take your time." Chloe's chest tightened at the compliment. How many patients like Lila were craving attention and kindness in a place where efficiency often took precedence over compassion? "It's my pleasure, Mrs. Franklin," she replied with a small smile. "You deserve the best care." She adjusted Lila's pillows, wiped her hands and face, and helped her eat breakfast. Lila's gratitude for these small acts of care made Chloe feel a renewed sense of purpose. When she promised to return later, Lila's quiet smile lingered in Chloe's mind long after she left the room. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Chloe juggled multiple patients, administered medications, and managed the usual chaos of the hospital floor. But her thoughts often wandered back to room 312. Lila's warmth had touched her heart, but there was something else, an undercurrent of sadness in her eyes, a heaviness in her voice. Chloe resolved to spend a little more time with Lila during her shifts. She knew that sometimes a compassionate ear could be as healing as the strongest medicine. But she had no idea that her decision would soon draw her into a mystery that would shake her faith in the profession she loved. Chloe was halfway through updating patient charts at the nurse's station when a sharp, persistent beeping cut through the ambient noise of the hospital. Her head snapped up, and her eyes locked onto the alert board. Room 312, Lila Franklin's room. Without hesitation, Chloe dropped her clipboard and sprinted down the hallway. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step heavier than the last. A flurry of thoughts raced through her mind. Had Lila fallen? Was it a heart complication? Or something else entirely? She burst through the door, prepared for anything, except what she found. The acrid stench hit her first, sharp and unmistakable. Then her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw Lila sitting upright in bed, her frail body trembling. The once crisp hospital gown was stained with a yellowish liquid, and the sheets beneath her were damp. Beside her lay a tipped-over blue urine bottle. "Mrs. Franklin," Chloe said gently, stepping closer. What happened? Are you hurt? Lila didn't respond immediately. Her head was bowed, her thin hands clutching the sheets as though they were a lifeline. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. The doctor did this. Chloe froze. For a moment, she thought she must have misheard. The doctor, she asked cautiously, did he accidentally spill the bottle? Lila nodded slowly, but there was something in her posture, a mix of shame and fear, that made Chloe's stomach twist. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of machines in the room. "It's okay, Mrs. Franklin," Chloe said softly, forcing a calmness into her voice that she didn't feel. "Let me clean this up, and we'll get you into some fresh clothes." As she went about her task, Chloe's mind raced. Why would a doctor be handling a urine bottle in the first place? That was a nurse's responsibility. And why hadn't he called for assistance after the spill? Why leave an elderly patient sitting in soiled sheets? Lila remained unusually quiet during the cleanup, her earlier warmth replaced by a distant sadness. Chloe tried to engage her in conversation, but Lila's responses were curt and detached. Something was wrong, but Chloe couldn't put her finger on it. Before leaving the room, Chloe hesitated at the door. "Mrs. Franklin, are you sure you're all right? Is there anything else you want to tell me?" Lila's gaze flicked up to meet Chloe's for a fleeting moment before dropping again. "No, dear," she murmured. "Thank you for your help." The words were polite, but the tone was hollow. As Chloe stepped back into the bustling hallway, a sense of unease clung to her. She couldn't shake the image of Lila's downcast eyes and trembling hands. This wasn't just a simple accident. For the rest of her shift, Chloe couldn't focus. Every task felt mechanical, her mind replaying the scene in room 312. Was Lila scared of something, or someone? And if so, why hadn't she said more? Later that evening, as the hospital quieted and the corridors grew still, Chloe found herself walking back to Lila's room. She hesitated outside the door, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Finally, she pushed it open. Lila was awake, her frail figure silhouetted against the faint glow of the bedside monitor. She looked up, startled, but relaxed when she saw Chloe. "I just wanted to check on you before I left," Chloe said softly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. Lila smiled faintly, but there was a fragility to it. "You're kind of worried about an old woman like me." "It's my job," Chloe replied, though she knew it was more than that. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Franklin, if there's anything bothering you, anything at all, you can tell me. I'm here to help." For a moment, Lila seemed to consider this. Her lips parted as though she were about to speak, but then she shook her head. "You're a good girl, Chloe," she said softly. "Don't go looking for trouble where there's none." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they only deepened Chloe's unease. She stayed a little longer, chatting with Lila about lighter topics, but her mind kept circling back to the unanswered questions. As Chloe left the room and headed toward the exit, the image of Lila's haunted expression stayed with her. Something was wrong at Bayside Medical Institute, and Chloe wasn't sure if she was ready to uncover the truth.